Okay, so welcome to everyone attending the last session today. Thank you for coming on board. Just a reminder, obviously we're all in the same situation at the moment, so it's just to kind of reiterate the guidance for you keeping your social distancing, especially when you guys are out there and some of you are still working with the children for the key workers, which is great. So well done for getting out there and doing that. Everyone else, we should obviously be staying at home and staying away as much as possible, not just for ourselves, but to also protect everyone else's friends and family and your own. So keep washing those hands, guys. So today's session is on level 2 perimeter and area. I say level 2, it starts off nice and basic. And you've got some example questions in there. So if you feel at any point you don't understand, if you're brave enough, you can unmute yourself and you can go at me. I'm more than happy for you to ask questions, but also you can just put something in the chat box, and Nick will let me know if there's any questions come up. So although we're going to focus on perimeter and area today, to be able to work out perimeter and area, you need to kind of know what a formula is. So I just wanted to have a quick recap on formula, just so you don't get confused as we go in. So formula is basically a mathematical rule which is expressed in numbers, letters, and symbols. So some formulas can be quite confusing. You don't necessarily know what you need to do in what order. So these are some of the shapes that we're going to look at today with the perimeter and areas, and what their formulas might look like. So at the moment, some of you might be looking at them and thinking, don't know what I need to do. Using your basic formula, thinking back to when you're at school, the most obvious thing to use is BODMAS. Some people use BIDMAS, basically the same thing, but some people like to use the O as order. Some people like to use it as indices. Basically, in what we're going to look at today, there are no brackets, so we can ignore that. Order is, if you can see on the screen, where you've got your circle, the area of a circle. Here you've got your radius squared. So that order is relating to that squared part. So anything with a squared in it, you need to do first before you then go on to your division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. There's also one basic rule that you guys need to remember when you're using formulas. It's making sure that, for example, if you look at the perimeter on the rectangle, so it says 2L. So some of you might be thinking, what do I need to do with 2L? You always must put times in between. So if it's a 2 and the L like it is there, it's 2 times whatever L is. So measure the length, you'll find out. Also, when it comes to, for example, area of a circle, so in the bottom right, you've then got pi r squared. So there's a symbol, there's a letter, basic rule, put in that multiplication sign in between them. Okay, so just a brief recap on formulas. So what is perimeter? Perimeter is the distance all the way around the edge of a shape. What do we need to do? We need to calculate the perimeter by measuring all the sides and add measurements together. So it's really important to remember you just measure the sides that you need. So obviously in an exam situation, there's going to be a diagram and it'll be pretty clear what sides you need. In the chat box, can anyone think of where you need to use perimeter in your everyday job role? Or anyone want to shout out, give me any examples of what you might need to measure up when you're out delivering your sessions?
I'll give you one, Cara, the coaching area.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, spot on. So yeah, if you're working out the area that you need to work in, you need to work out the perimeter of that. Maybe something like athletics, if you need to measure the distance or where that they need to run around, if they need to do a 200-meter run, then you're going to need to get that all measured out. So the most important thing to remember with the perimeter is all of the units must be the same measurements. So I hate to use the word catch you out in the exam. They don't like to catch you out in the exam. However, some examples will have some in meters, some in centimeters in the same question, but it's there to test you and to show that you can use conversions, not to catch you out. So what is an area? An area is basically the shape, an area of the shape. It's a measure of a surface covered by a given shape. So area can be measured in square units. So we need to remember that everything in your answers, it comes out in millimeters squared, centimeters squared, meters squared, or kilometers squared. So in the brackets, they are what should be shown in your answers when you're finally doing your exams. Again, just remember all those measurements must be in the same units when you're calculating that area. So now you've learned, or recapped hopefully, what perimeter and area are. We're going to look at some specific shapes and how to actually work them out. So looking at your basic rectangle, so the easiest one. So these are your perimeter and area formulas. So to work out the perimeter, add up the length, the width, the length, and the width. If that's a basic rectangle, measure your sides, add them all together, nice and simple. With your area, you need to do your length times your width. So this one, you only need the 2 measurements because you're finding that area inside of this rectangle, not on the outside. So the perimeter, always remember the outside. Area is the bit in the middle. Anyone think of where you might need to use in your everyday work challenges? When do you need to figure out what area is needed? Again, you can use the chat box or you can shout out. So for example, right now, a good example could be your social distancing. So if you are working with any kids and they've got to stay 2 meters away from each other, you need to be figuring out where those 2 meters are. So how many kids have you got? Work out the area of your hall, your playground, wherever you're working with them, and make sure there is enough 2 meters squared in each of those areas for your kids to be able to be in that suitable distance away. So an example question based on both perimeter and area, looking at your rectangle, looking at the picture that's just come up, what's the most obvious thing we need to do before we can work out either the area or the perimeter of this patio? Can anyone see anything obvious that stands out? So they've given you the length and the width.
Centimeters and meters.
Exactly, yes, spot on. So the first thing we need to do, if we're going to work out the perimeter of this patio area, you must convert one way or the other. I would look at what the answer is asking you to put it in. So does it want it in centimeters or meters? In this example, you've only got one conversion to do. So look at what it wants the answer in. The exam question will say, give your answer in meters or centimeters. So look at what it's in and then convert either way. So for this example, for the perimeter, I've chosen to convert from centimeters to meters. So 180 divided by 100 is 1.8. I now know that they're both in meters. I can then add them all up. My total perimeter of this patio is 7.6 in meters. When it comes to the area of this patio, again, I need to do exactly the same. So again, I've chosen to stick with changing from centimeters to meters. Just so you guys know, you also must show, so you might in your head already know that 180 centimeters is 1.8. You must show that in your working out. So you must actually write in 180 divided by 100. So you need to show everything that you do in your maths exam. Once I know what the conversion is, 2 times 1.8 is then 3.6. So remembering what we learned earlier, that your area must be shown in your meters squared. So it's 3.6 meters squared. Okay. We're going to also look at a level 2, they'll expect you to know how to work out different shapes. So composite shapes is basically kind of uneven shapes, maybe shapes kind of merged together. So this isn't necessarily a shape in itself, but what you will be able to see in the next slide is how we can then just kind of break it down a bit. So this is a basic shape. We can work out the perimeter. And again, as learning what you heard earlier, it is add up all those sides. So for in this instance, they have left out one of the measurements, but that's quite easily worked out by doing the top measurement, which is 5, that goes all the way across, and then minusing the very bottom measurement, 3.5. That obviously is going to tell you what's left. So we now know that that measurement that's missing is 1.5. There could be an exam question that will do that. Sometimes they leave a couple out and expect you to work them out. Again, you must show that working out in your answer. So then we can add them all up. And it's going to give us a total perimeter of 16 meters. So for the area, it gets a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to talk you through how to do it first, and then I'm going to show you. So basically, you need to split these two into an even shape. So at the moment, I can see that there's quite clearly two kind of rectangle and a square, whatever way you look at it, as long as you split it into another even shape. So work out those two areas separately, and then add the two areas together. So an example question for working out that area. So you'll be able to see on the diagram that I've chosen to across the bottom. That gives me one large rectangle at the top, almost a square, but more of a rectangle at the bottom. I chose to go that way because it's given me less working out, because I automatically know what the measurements are for my length and my width. However, there's absolutely no right or wrong answers to whether you went down the middle, so where the bottom part of the shape, and you can see the arrow come up 1.5 meters. I could have taken it all the way up there, and that still would have given me two different shapes, which I could then use. So you just need to split it up. So first of all, work out the area of shape A. So I can see from the diagram that it's 5 in length and 1.5 in width, which gives me 7.5. I then do the same for shape B, which is an answer of 5.25. Simply then add them together. Going to give me my total area of that particular shape, 12.75 meters. We could put that into a context of, say, you're working with your children. You're in the playground, or this is the shape of your hall, and you've got a guidance in your risk assessment that every child needs 1 meter or 2 meters per child. If you then divide that 12.75 by, say, 2 meters at the moment, because that's how much social distancing we need, it's going to tell you how many children that you can have in that area. So whilst you guys might think that you don't necessarily use maths very much since you've moved school, I'm pretty sure that you have, and you do use it every single day. So it's just kind of using that and putting that into context, which I'll always try and do. If you're ever stuck on anything, I'll always try and put that into context of your everyday jobs. So moving on to triangles, so it gets a little bit harder with triangles. So these are your formulas that you'll need to look at. So the perimeter of a triangle, again, exactly the same as your rectangle, just need to measure and add up all the outside edges. The area is slightly different in that it's base times height divided by 2. The most simple way to remember with triangles is it's basically half of a rectangle. So if whatever you're watching this from, if you've got a laptop in front of you, if you've got your iPhone or any sort of smartphone in front of you, if you literally just cover half of what whatever it is that you're looking at right now. Cover half of it, starting from the top left-hand point to the bottom right-hand point. You cover half of it, you'll see a triangle. Okay, so that's why it's base times height divided by 2, because it is half of basically what you're doing with a triangle. So an example question to help you out. Again, the most obvious thing that stands out is what? Does anyone tell me?
Yeah, you've got meters and centimeters there again.
Yeah, spot on. So yeah, again, you need to do a conversion. So in this instance, I personally would change from centimeters. I would leave the centimeters and I would change the meter into centimeters, because that only gives me one thing to do. You could then obviously again look at your answer and see what's expecting you to work it out in. There's no right or wrong, whatever you feel comfortable, entirely up to you. So for the perimeter, you need to show that conversion first. So as I said, I've chosen to do change the meters. So 5.9 times your 100 then gives me 590 centimeters. So I can now quite simply add them all up. It's going to give me the total measurement, which is 1,420 centimeters. When it comes to the area, again, exactly the same. Show that conversion, and then do your, as if you were going to work it out, if it was a rectangle, do your length times your width, but then just make sure you divide it by 2, because your triangle is half of your rectangle, giving me the answer of 1,062 meters, not forgetting your little squared. Okay, you will lose marks if you don't put meters squared if you're working out an area, so make sure you remember that. Okay, so starts to get slightly harder, and at level 2 you will definitely get some sort of area question on circles, just because they like to challenge you. So the first thing to remember about circles is what the radius is. So the radius is basically the distance from the middle center point to the edge of the circle. Doesn't matter where that arrow is. So this thick arrow here, doesn't matter at what point it is, whether it's pointed up here, whether it's pointed on the, doesn't matter what part of the clock as such it's pointing at. It all is just the radius. Okay, so you need to measure that. In an exam, they will have to give you what the measurement is. They won't expect you to start getting a ruler out or anything and measuring it. They will give you those. You also need to know what a diameter is. Again, I hate to use the word catch you out, but sometimes they might give you the full diameter. But as you saw earlier, when you work out the area of the circle, you don't actually need to know the diameter. You do need to know the radius, but it may give you the diameter to expect you to then work out what the radius is. So the diameter is just the whole way across the circle. So from one, making sure you go through that middle part of the circle, one end to the other. So it's just basically the widest part of that circle. So your circles then slightly change. So the area there is still the same as in working out the area. However, there's not perimeter of the circle. It's now called the circumference. So to work out the circumference, it's basically the distance all the way around the edge of the circle. And you, like the perimeter, it is only obviously when it's talking about circles. With the area, you need to remember what pi is. Sometimes they will give you what pi is in the exam, and sometimes they won't. So I like you guys to remember it, and I try and drill it in as much as possible. Hopefully you'll now will be thinking, what is pi? If anyone does know, write it in the chat box. It'd be great to see what your memory's like. See if anyone has remembered, but we'll come on to that in a minute. So yeah, for the area of the circle, it's your pi radius squared. So remember, it could be written as I've written it down below. There could be the times in there. However, it could be written as it is in the diagram, just pi r squared. thinking back to the formulas earlier, I said the most important thing to remember is using BODMAS and doing it in order. So you need to make sure that you remember that you have to work out what the R squared is first. So I'm going to give you an example question so you can see how that works. So this is your example question that you might get in an exam. Like I said earlier, they're not going to be as nice as to give you the radius straight away. They're going to expect you to work that out. So first of all, to work out the circumference of this circle, the formula is 2 pi r. So again, remembering the simple rule from formulas, putting in the multiplication signs. So the diameter divided by 2 is going to be 6 divided by 2, which is 3. So now we know what the radius is. We can then do the 2 times 3.14 is your pi, in case you didn't get that, times 3 is 18.84. So the circumference is 18.84. So to work out the area of that circle, again, we need to show how we get in the radius. So that is divided by 2 because the radius is only halfway across. We then do your 3 times 3, which is going to give you your 9. So that is the squared part of the radius. So hopefully you guys will remember, if you square it, you're basically, whatever the number is, you times it twice. If that was a cube, so if it was a 3, you times it 3 times. So if that was 3 cubed, it would be 3 times 3 times 3. In this instance, we know our radius is 3, so we just do it twice. Don't fall into the trap of doing it 3 times 2, which is what a lot of people do. Really important thing to remember there. So then adding in your pi, 3.14 times the 9, because we now know that the radius squared is 9, gives us an area of 28.26 centimeters. Remember, it's squared. So now I'm going to see what you've learned. So what I'd like you to do is have a go at the worksheet. So attached to this invite, I gave it a worksheet. There's 2 ways of doing this. You can either print it out if you've got that option, which is great. If you haven't, as long as you can see it and open it, if you can write 1 to 5 you can write it straight into an email, you can write it on a bit of paper. I'm more than happy for you to do that. If you want to do it all written by hand, then take a picture of it and send it to me. I need to see all your working out in there. If you choose to do it straight into an email, that's great, because you will be doing your final maths exam on the computer. So it's good to kind of start using the keys on the computer to see where things are, to see that, for example, there is no divide sign. You will not be able to use a divide sign on your final maths exam. So the button where the question mark is, there's your dash. You'd have to use that instead. So it's really good practice for you guys to write it your answer straight into an email and show me you're working out. You can either then scan that picture, scan or send me a picture of your answers to my email address. You've all got my email address because I've been emailing you loads. So, anyone got any questions? Has anyone learned anything?
I certainly have, Cara, and I think it's just as a note to the learners. Obviously, there is some really tricky stuff within there. So trust me, you're not the only ones that are looking at that sometimes and struggling. But I think that's some really valuable support that you put in place there, Cara. So hopefully the guys that are on, Ben, Chantel, Josh, Liam, Stu, you're all using this time and hopefully going to use this couple-week window to really get yourself ahead. Again, I mentioned it 3 or 4 times throughout the day now, but thinking about getting ahead of the curve, this is a great opportunity for you to catch up, get in front on top of your English and maths work when you've got someone like Cara to support you through that. Is a really great resource, and you're really fortunate to have that. So hopefully you're all feeling a little bit more confident on that now following that session.
Just so you know, obviously, apart from the recording, you can listen to it back. But I did also attach the presentation in the invite, so you can go back over it and look at it. More than happy for you guys to do that. And yeah, get in contact if you've got any questions on anything that I've gone through. So I'm now going to stop the recording, and then if anyone wants to stay on and ask me anything now, if you have written down any questions, then I'll stay on. I'm more than happy to answer them for you. Have a good day, guys.
Thanks, Cara.